Hey, this is the Geek Protagonist, and I wanted to talk about something because I listened to the interview on Comics by Perch with Kaare Andrews. Now, I have very tiny back and forth with Kaare Andrews on Instagram. He always says something nice and awesome. If you haven't noticed yet, I'm a fan of his work. The fact that Kaare Andrews is I know he does the Rag Day movies and stuff like that, but I said something about AWA, and he, it's always cool. He responds. He's just always the nicest guy. So then I said something to him about, I listened to the actual interview, and the fact that his comics were the first indie comics I covered that I reviewed on this channel. You can find it as the Renato Jones ones, 1 and 2. As well as, I think they were the second and third comics I ever did behind the Incredible Hulk. Specifically, I think it was Planet Hulk, my big omnibus that got me years ago. So, listening to the conversation, it was very, very interesting. Because he explained how he's not a nihilist. Or nihilist, however you want to pronounce it. I like saying nihilist. But basically, he is not a person that looks at it as empty. He looks at it as a positive. So he is like many others who believes that the comic book movie will eventually go the way of the Western. That actually can happen. The funny thing is, a lot of people don't remember, though, because I was born as the Western. When I was growing up, the Western genre was still strong, but it was definitely starting to sputter out. Like, outside of Clint Eastwood and, some of the John Wayne ones or stuff, it kind of was there. I wasn't in the heyday of, like, 310 to Yuma, The Magnificent Seven, things like that. So, I the Shootist, I wasn't around during that time. Or, what's name's Sons. So it kind of hit home listening to him. Now here's something. Here's something very funny. I don't know if people remember, the Western and space genre was actually very popular too, but Westerns, I think, were like the big thing at one time. Westerns lasted decades. So we've had comic book films, not saying good or bad, and I'm talking about when it started becoming more consistent, since roughly the 90s. Now, we really started hitting that mega stride around 08 on, but we started hitting something in the early 2000s. So, I say, like, from Batman 89, things started to kind of spark up, but we really hit that stride roughly around, the 2000s, where you had Blade, like I said, in the late 90s into the 2000s, because you had Blade, which said so much. Excellent film series overall. Give or take how you feel about the third one, doesn't really matter. Then you had X-Men. First two did very, very well. And then you had Spider-Man. Also, first two did very well. So back then, a lot of times the third films were the ones that didn't do so hot. But overall, you had an amazing genre, right? You hit the mid-2000s into the 2000s, you had Superman Returns that didn't do as great. Not a bad film, no. Whether you I understand why, and I know this is not a popular thing, but I think Kevin Spacey, in my personal opinion, outside of Michael Rosenbaum, was the best Lex Luthor. Like, it's always between him and Michael Rosenbaum for me. And I know, aside from all of the other things that happened, I'm talking about the sheer talent, acting, the actual artistic thing. So please don't start sitting there and go, oh, he supports Kevin Spacey, blah, blah, blah. No. No, don't even kill in that noise. I'm talking from an artistic point of view, because there are people who want to grab at something and go, well, he did that. No, I'm talking about from an acting point of view. Anyway, I don't personally think the comic book genre is going to go away ever fully. I think it will always be popular. What I do think will happen, which Kaare, I think, was hinting to that too, the superhero genre as we know it is going to go away. Because, for example, Hellboy is a comic book. A lot of people don't realize Bullet to the Head is a comic book. Two Guns that had Denzel and Mark Wahlberg, that's a comic book. So there is so much to mine in the comic book industry still that could come out that people wouldn't even be aware is a comic book, besides superheroes. And there's a lot of superhero stuff that hasn't even been tapped, that touches on different things. That's why stuff like The Boys is working, and Doom Patrol, because it's going for that weird, it's not your typical superhero kind of story. And that's what they kind of need to do. I would love to see a Savage Dragon movie. I know, I don't care. I would still love to see a Savage Dragon movie. I think that'd be cool. Like this, alien kind of mutant kind of guy. I know what he is. Just for, if you didn't read it, I'm not going to spoil if he's an alien or a mutant. But how he's a police officer in the Chicago PD, and he fights supervillains. He has like super strength, feeling factor, all 9. Savage Dragon is so good. But beyond that, we are starting to see a lot of films that aren't your typical everyday superhero genre. It's stuff that subverts the genre. But I like some of the points that they were talking about the fact that the movies have kind of hurt the comics, but also I think the comics themselves have hurt the comics too, because he talked about, like, you need to pay people. Like, pay a good artist a great wage if they're a great artist, and give some of the people the lower projects and stuff that they're the cheaper artists, that maybe something you're not trying to put on. Like, you should put your best foot forward on stuff like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Iron Man, like those top tier X-Men. And then the other ones, get these cheaper artists to get a chance, because some of them could be really good. Like, I do think some of the cheaper artists aren't bad, but the problem is you sell books on names. And I love the fact that and that interview finally told me why I gravitated to him so hard. Because I knew about Kaare Andrews, but I kind of discovered him on my own at the same time. I liked when I read Iron Fist. Someone I did that, I actually stood there and read it. And then I started noticing a few comics that I liked. He was on them. So I started looking into him more as a creator, and I just loved what he did. And I'm like, this guy is great. And I was trying to put my finger on it. Like, why do I like this guy so much? And listening to a couple of his interviews and stuff, I finally pieced it together. When he writes a comic book, he's not writing a screenplay or writing for the trades or now writing for Netflix and stuff. And he explained, he was like, if you want to break into that business, it's actually not as hard as you think. If you got some talent, you can get there. He's writing a comic book because he loves comic books. And when he talked about every 20 years or so, which he's right, since in my life, this is the second time, comics have dropped in their popularity and stuff. He's like, they're going to get a renaissance. And he feels when we start getting bad superhero films on a regular, comics are going to have to upswing again, because, and they're right. I don't have a problem with these people, but there is something I ran into that I'm noticing comic book people. So as I was saying, noticing that comic book people have been doing lately, which has been this thing of, we're going to write these books, but they're writing them like TV dramas and stuff. Like, no, when I read a comic book, depending on the comic, now there's political intrigue comics, there's action comic books, there's stuff, of course you want to see character development and everything, but I also want to see a really cool story where they're doing this. Like, for example, a lot of comic books lately, and I don't hate this because I like it, because it's something people do. I do it myself, so as many people. Shows them eating. which is a very natural thing. But then when it's like every comic book, all of them are constantly eating. It's kind of like the thing that happened with Avengers with the shawarma thing. Everyone's like, oh, they all like shawarma stuff, so we're just going to keep doing it. And it's like, well, no, not everyone needs to eat all the time. You can make that a character trait, or you could do something where maybe they're all breaking bread, but you don't need to every issue they're having it. And what it really comes down to is, I like what Kaare Andrew said. Like, he's like, listen, when this is what it is, it's comic books. And yeah, these things can translate, and I'm not quoting, I'm more paraphrasing. But he's right. Like, he's like, look, when he got into comics, people were like, at the time when it was a bust, they're like, oh, it could be like 5 years. And with the 5 years, that's it. Comics are gone. And he's like, well, then I guess I'm writing for comics for the next 5 years until they're gone. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, you get these few that love it. And what he's hoping happens is, if the movies and things start to bust and these people start to realize that this is not their backdoor into their Hollywood fame, because it seems like most of these writers, yeah, that's what they want to do. They want to turn around and they want to write video game scripts, and they want to write movie scripts and TV show scripts. And don't get me wrong, it's because they do pay well, and it's not wrong with it either. Sometimes when you get the comic book creator or someone who worked on it, it actually helps enhance the story. But now you run into the next problem. In Hollywood, a lot of times the comic book people are looked down upon. And they're right. I know this because I know a couple people doing that. So I think they kind of hit the nail on the head on that video in particular about what the problem is. The problem is that you're getting people that are going into the medium, and I totally 100% believe this. It's just from what I've seen. They're not there to, hey, I always wanted to tell you this crazy Batman story, or I always wanted to do this story, or I always just wanted to write my own comic book and just have people read it or this. They're there to tell you about how bad you are, what this type of thing is, if you're this thing or that, and try to get a TV deal or try to get a movie deal. And like he said, more times out of not, it doesn't work that way. And the thing is that comic books have a uniqueness to them, and I agreed with him on that too. It's the only medium that's quite like itself. Yeah, like you have video games. There are some video games that play more like movies. There's certain things, but comic books have that unique thing of being the pictures to words to the balances and stuff that nothing else does. And the fact that they were talking about it, because funny enough, I was actually told this before about, well, if you want to make it big, you need to write a novel and stuff like this. And it's like, what? Well, if you have no aspirations to write a novel ever, why would you want to? That's words, your description, that's a different type of writing style. And on top of that, you have it where now they're getting like script writers and actors. And don't get me wrong, I backed Keanu Reeves' Boom Studios thing. Do I think they're really just trying to make that another movie franchise? Yes. But I like Keanu Reeves. So yeah, in this particular situation, I bought it because of the name, because I think Keanu Reeves is an amazing person and I think he's awesome. I'm a huge fan of his, and I wanted to support his comic. But then you got, like, I heard Emilia Clarke, which I have to look into that. Like, she's coming out with a comic book. And people are like, oh, they're just selling them off a name alone. And I'm like, well, yeah, now, did some of them actually have a desire? For example, Michael B. Jordan. There is a lot of stuff coming out of him that he is a geek. So it's like, yeah, these comic books and things like that. Now, there is a comic that I have that I will review that I am so, and I've tried to tweet him. I hope one day I become a big enough YouTuber or something that I could get a little clout that when people see me say something, they can come back. There is this comic book, and I'll review it when I get to it, that I loved, that Thomas Jane did, called Bad Planet. And he did this back when it wasn't the craziest, coolest thing to be that. It was when he had, like, I think it was an accident or something, and he was sick. And he had like a fever dream, and he saw these crazy spider things. And it's just when I reviewed a comic, you'll get there. There was supposed to be like a video game with it at one point and stuff, and there's like images, and I was very excited about this. And I read it and I'm like, this looks so cool. And I kept seeing imagery of it and I read it and I loved it. That's spoiler to the review, but I'll get more nuances with the review. And it's been on a cliffhanger and he wrote it years ago. And like, I went on the hunt to get this thing, but that doesn't mean every single writer that does it. A lot of times they're usually delegating. They have an idea, they're delegating, but then it's like, are you delegating this to get a movie, or are you delegating this because you love comic books? Like, Keanu Reeves killed it with me, where I immediately backed this thing when the first thing that came out of his mouth is, comics are awesome. Boom, right there. Everything you ever need to know about a comic book. And yes, people use it for political moves, for preaching and all this stuff, and there is a place for that. So don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here saying it's not, but I shouldn't be seeing like Spider-Man on a regular basis dealing with BLM. Not saying that I'm talking about Peter, not saying that he should never touch on it, not saying that it should never come up, but the whole comic shouldn't be just that. Like, one of the biggest problems with the Captain Marvel comic books is it feels very tyrannical when it comes to that message between that and men. And the thing is that there is a great character there. Like I said, one time I really was into it. She says one of my favorite comic book costumes ever. But I've seen a lot of times where I'm reading it, and I was enjoying her when she first became Captain Marvel, actually. And as I kept reading, it's like, well, men this and then and that. And I'm like, and I'll never, ever, ever, and I wish I could find that panel. I'll never get over when I read Moon Girl and they were doing the, maybe I should just buy the Moon Girl things and then eventually just find it, just cause I just want to show it to you so bad. And she starts talking about geniuses. And she goes, who wrote this book? Like, who wrote this list? It was men. Men wrote this list. How do men know who the geniuses is? Because it's why is the first set of guys men? And it's men and men and men and men and men and men. Because Marvel has established that the smartest person is Moon Girl. Not Valeria Richards, not Reed Richards. Even though Moon Girl makes a lot of quirky, old school 80s Donatello kind of inventions. And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I did like Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur. I thought it was a cool concept, girl dinosaur. Like I told y'all, I have those little kid things I like. So you put a dinosaur in something, I might check it out. You put certain little simple things into something, and it's gonna get my attention, and I don't care. It's my youthful heart. I love a cool dinosaur thing or something. So it's nothing against that, and I like a good kid story because sometimes I just want bad guys be bad guys, good guys be good guys, have fun, yeah, kind of thing. Sue me. I love deep stuff, I love non-deep stuff. I have a wide array of things I like. And when she did that, it was like she was preaching to Moon Girl. Moon Girl, I think, is like, what, 9, 10? I'm like, why are you having this conversation with her? Yeah, that men did this and men did that because men think they're smarter than women. And I'm like, why are you having this conversation with a child? I don't care how much of a genius she is. She's still a child. And it just turned me all the way off. And I was going to buy the series, and I remember picking it up just to check it out. And that happened, and it just completely turned me off to the series because it was like, that was so unnecessary. Now, I have not read the rest of the series, and I felt as though maybe I wrote it off too fast, I guess you could say, to see if that was just a one-off page or is it something that was ongoing. But Captain Marvel doing stuff like that, I'm like, that is not necessary. Now, if you want the character to be that way, where she's all about women are great, men suck, okay, then don't expect the sales to be blowing it through the roof, because, and this is not something where I'm like, oh, more guys read comic books than females. Not that females don't, not that women don't. But on average, I'm talking about when it comes to like Marvel and stuff, from what they say, more guys read them. But here's the thing. I love the fact that women read comic books. I have female friends who read comics, and I love every second of it because it's so cool to hear their perspectives. Say when I play D&D with a few females, I play, one of my female best friend plays video games. Like, I love that Actually, most of the women I know play video games. And I ain't talking about just Super Mario. Final Fantasies, different things like that, Halos, Overwatch. And I love that. So don't get it wrong when I'm saying that. But the thing is, you got to know your audience. If I write a comic and it's just like, yeah, it's the black experience and the black life and the black, and the black matters. And that's what it matters. Certain people are going to be turned off by that militant kind of style. You got to know your audience. But my first and foremost, even if I read something and it's not great, but I know you poured your heart and soul into it, and I got it, and I'll be honest about it. But But unless you're really trying to push like an agenda or something like that, I'm gonna be there. Right? I'll at least give you the benefit of the doubt, especially if you're indie. Because some people are like, well, why can you do that to indie versus like a Marvel person? Because it's not the same. Until you've done it, it's different. So I love when Kaare Andrews talked about how he's loving comics. I'm like, that's why I like him so much. He's there to write comics. Does he do other stuff? Yes. But when he writes a comic book, he talked about Renato. He didn't think of Renato as a movie. He thought of Renato as this would be a really cool thing to do in a comic book. He's like, I don't even think they can make Renato a movie. Now, I'll be for real with you. I think they can. It's very cinematic feeling. It reminds me of Sin City, so I totally think they can, actually. And I would love to see like a little mini-series of that. Just saying. But I don't know. It was a cool thing. It was nice to hear, and it's just me rambling. And it was just really cool that you hear his stuff. And check out Amazing Fantasy. It's funny, because I'll close out with this. He said that when he thinks of Captain America, he always thinks of World War II. When he thinks of Peter Parker, he always thinks of the origin story. His Amazing Fantasy deals with that. And I like the fact that he explained that he thinks he does his best work when it's not something in continuity, like hard continuity. And I like that he's like, I know my spot here. I'm good at this. I'm not the best at that. It was just really, really interesting. So if you get a chance, it's on Comics by Perch. It's Kaare Andrews. And I think they did it yesterday. And it's something that I think you'll really, really like. It's good to hear creators just talk and sometimes hear. And even creators you don't like, sometimes listen to what they say, because you would be surprised what you get out of it. Good or bad, like sometimes hearing their mindset can inform you on where they're making their decisions. Well, that's all for now. So this is Geek Protagonist. You stay safe, you stay healthy, you stay real. Like I said, it's just me rambling. I'll see you.